Well, good day, everyone. Welcome to the November installment of our virtual conversations here at Leadership Memphis. Future focused, disrupting the classroom with innovative and vocational education. Our goal in presenting this topic today is to bring forward the need to reintroduce vocational education throughout our school systems and create accessible training opportunities to increase the labor pool skilled in manufacturing and industry trades. We are pleased to have two community leaders directly involved in this aspect of economic development in Memphis. Amity Schuyler, Senior Vice President of Workforce Development for the Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce, and Skip Redmond, President of More Tech. In a moment, I'll introduce Bridgette Green, our moderator, who will guide us through our conversation. But before I do that, I wanted to introduce myself. I am Michelle Dooner. I am the Director of Development and Alumni Engagement here at Leadership Memphis. And Austin Brown, who is the Alumni Engagement Coordinator, and he is monitoring our chat feature today. So it's now my privilege to introduce today's moderator, Bridgette Green, member of Leadership Memphis's executive class of 2013. She would probably say the best class ever. Mrs. Green is co-founder and managing principal of Top Cat Masonry Contractors, LLC, which just celebrated 25 years in business here in Memphis. So congratulations to her and her team. Among her notable accomplishments, Bridgette was named a Leadership Memphis Changemaker in 2020, CEO of the Year inside Memphis Magazine, and a Memphis Business Journal Superwoman in Business. She serves on the advisory board of Tennessee College of Applied Technology and is a member of the National Association of Women Business Owners. So with that, I will turn it over to Bridgette.
Thank you, Michelle. It's my pleasure to introduce two dynamic panelists for today. Starting with Amity Schuyler. Amity relocated from Palm Beach to assume the role of Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Education, and then to Memphis as the Chief of Strategy and Innovation for Shelby County Schools. And a 20-year cabinet level and CEO roles in nonprofit, state and local government sectors, she brings to her current role as the Senior Vice President of Workforce Development with the Greater Memphis Chamber, a deep understanding of the importance of creating economic mobility through the creation and access to quality jobs. And now also Mr. Skip Redmond, President and CEO of More Tech. Skip has an extensive background in education, serving as principal of both Fairview Junior High and Briarcrest High School, where he also spent a number of years as a VP of Advancement. He was named to his current position in 2013, and under his leadership, More Tech has obtained a 97% placement and a 65% completion rate. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, let's get started. The first question is, how is Memphis's workforce comprised right now? Do either of you have an idea of the percentage of workers in Memphis that are trained in a vocational trade? And with Skip.
I'm not as keen on that statistic as maybe Amity would, being with the chamber, and she'd have more statistics on that. But I know that More Tech has been providing Memphis since 1938 with workforce talent, and so as far as the number percentages, Amity, can you jump in here on that one?
Well, I think that that's a slippery slope in terms of measurement, right? First, anybody that has a job right now is skilled in something. I think when we talk about our workforce ecosystem, here's what we need to acknowledge is that Memphis is very quickly becoming a region of skilled trades. So our advanced manufacturing is growing, our construction is growing, our demand for STEM graduates is growing, and we also have to look at STEM as an occupational trade as well in many cases. And so the landscape in Memphis and also across the country is changing more quickly than we are producing skilled workers. And that really is what we're butting up against when we start talking about a need to start doubling down on occupational training and vocational education.
Thank you. Thank you for that. What are some trends in vocational education and workforce development in the city? Would you say, Amity?
Yeah, so it's a couple things. So going back to our existing population, about 50% of all adults across the country, also in Tennessee, also in Memphis, have the highest credential of a high school diploma. And so as we start talking about higher education, we always think about higher education in terms of the college context, but we also have to think about it in terms of higher education in the adult context. So we're seeing a trend of employers to start creating their own vocational training because we're not spitting them out quickly enough inside of the region, meaning Skip only has so many seats that he can fill at a time. You can only crank it out quickly. The bottom line is that the demand very quickly surpassed the supply side. Some of that has to do with the fact that our region has changed quickly after the pandemic. Some of that has to do with a tremendous lack of awareness at the education level, whether that's in the K-12 classroom, junior college, or university. There was a disconnect in systems that were not talking to one another. And some of that has to do with just advancements in technology, period. The World Economic Forum estimates that about 50% of the globe's workforce, 50% of anybody that is in a job today is going to need to be reskilled and upskilled in some capacity to conquer and master the technology that is starting to drive the workplaces. You've noticed that already. If you go to Walgreens or Kroger, you're checking yourself out, right? If you were going to your healthcare provider, I just went to Campbell Clinic to get my cortisone shot. I had to check myself in and pay online. And that's just a basic example how skills are changing. And so the trends in the workforce that we are seeing are employers really quickly ramping up their own internal training programs and then turning to education providers and stakeholders to determine how quickly they can partner with one another to solve for the skills gaps that they are really starting to experience in the workforce. It was a long version to a short question. I'm sorry, Bridget.
Thank you for that. No, that's great information. So Skip, what is
let me jump in on what she said.
Okay.
As far as our school is concerned, we were really concerned when the pandemic hit about how we would move forward with our training. A lot of, almost all of it is hands-on. And so, a lot of folks went through the pandemic and they got attached to their phones and their screens and everything and Zoom and one of the things that we were concerned about was the fact that we would lose enrollment. And I would say that our enrollment has been on a steady climb. It's not what we would like or hoped it would be at this time. We can probably take another 100% of what we enroll now. We have about 400 students enrolled in various programs, and whether it's associate degrees, diplomas, or certificates, we have room for additional students. So, the workforce is still, I say the people entering into the workforce is still focused on maybe a 4-year degree, and there needs to continue to be more interest and support for training in a vocational trade and a vocational career. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry.
Thank you. No, that's great information.
I'm sorry, Bridget, if I could just add to that to share some data just for the context of how quickly things are changing. We did some workforce projections. So in the next 5 years, we will need 249% growth in engine and machine assemblers, a 122% growth in welding, soldering, brazing, and machine setters, a 65% growth in millwrights, a 49% growth over the next 5 years in machine setters and operators, and then a 95% growth in cutting, punching, press machine setters and operators. Those are the biggest in-demand positions across our whole ecosystem over the next 5 years by projected growth. 5 years before that, it was more medical, emergency managers, crane operators. We were starting to see some of the skilled trades come in as in demand. But looking forward to this next 5 years, you can see the pivot in our ecosystem. First, for really quality jobs. These are jobs that are paying $22 and more, well more an hour. And second, certainly more industrial and vocational based.
Wow, that's great information. Thank you. So Skip, what are some vocational programs that exist in Memphis? And are there some that you think need more attention than others?
Well, I think there's only one vocational training program in Memphis, that's More Tech. No, obviously, the Memphis Shelby County school system and the municipal schools have CTE programs. They're providing as much effort as they can at this time, depending on funding. And I think that the focus is trying to grow. And in the West Tennessee area, obviously we have the TCAT and Southwest Community College training folks for vocational training. As far as Arkansas, there's ASU Mid-South. And in Northwest Mississippi, there's Northwest Community College. All of those programs are training in workforce development. More Tech has 7 programs. We're private, nonprofit. We do try to keep our tuition about at the same level as a state tuition for all of these regional schools. There's also several, I guess, for-profit schools like Delta in I guess that's South Haven, Delta Technical Center. Those are for-profit schools. They do the same type of workforce training. I'll just throw this out there. It's a lot more expensive. Anyway, at More Tech, we have seven different programs that you could receive an associate degree, a diploma, or a certificate. Auto Tech is our newest program, which has garnered a lot of support from our local auto dealers, and we have a welding program that's huge. Our HVAC program is strong. The property maintenance program, which is basically construction programs, wiring, plumbing, and carpentry. We also have an industrial maintenance program and a plumbing apprenticeship program. I think I covered it. Also our machining program is very, very, very well received by the local manufacturers. And we have within the machining program, there's CNC and manual operations. So that's what we have. I would suggest that we look at trying to develop a more hands-on and practical approach to all of vocational training. I know that Amity and I are working together with a Good Jobs grant that is going to sharpen the pencil, basically shorten the time length that it would take to get folks trained and on a payroll as quickly as possible. So, and we may get into that a little bit later, but those are the kinds of programs that I see that are in the Memphis region for workforce training.
And that's great. It sounds like there's a great process by which you can either go nonprofit or for-profit. So as a follow-up question though, Skip, with your More Tech programs, how hard is it to access those programs?
It's really simple. As far as access, we do have an entrance exam but we're talking about basic skills. If a student receives an 18 on his ACT, we waive the entrance exam, but they have to have some skills, being able to read and do math, particularly at the Algebra 1 or better level. As far as funding is concerned, you know, we're a Tennessee Promise School. We receive Pell funding. We receive TSAC funding, and we do not do student loans. We feel like that a student, and our tuition it can be covered completely by Pell funds or TSAC funds, those kinds of things. But we do feel like the student is more engaged if they've got a little bit of skin in the game, and as well as when they graduate, they're not tied to a student loan and having to pay money back. So that's one of the unique things about Vortec, is that once they finish Vortec, 97% of them get a job, and they're making money and putting it into their pocket, not paying off a student loan. And so that's one of the things that makes us accessible and yet affordable.
Thank you. Great information. Great information. So Amity, how is the Chamber promoting programs that elevate vocational education?
Yeah, so the Chamber's primary role right now is to make sure that in the workforce ecosystem, so that would be students, teachers, parents, career coaches, anybody who is touching anyone that's coaching them into a job or thinking about a job. One of our biggest roles right now is to provide the data around the forecast so that everyone can make an educated decision about their career paths. We've got students that are going to be entering university and colleges. We've got students that already know that maybe university is not for them. We have adults stuck in sandpit jobs, and they recognize that they need to upskill, but they're not quite sure what to do. Having the right factual information about job forecast, job growth, as well as what these jobs pay, is one of the most urgent and important things that the Chamber is leading right now. The other thing that we're really pushing in on, I call it a whole lot of pressure and a little bit of support, is trying to speed up our programs that are providing these types of educational pathways. Vocational education is extremely deliberate because it's hands-on. There are accreditation standards in the credit hour learning space that have to be met. But there's also a model that is taken root in the Midwest, it's taken root in the South, that is non-credit hour bearing training. We call those accelerated skills training centers. And that's essentially what our Good Jobs grant that Skip mentioned earlier provides a down payment on. It allows technical schools like Vortec, University of Memphis Global, to kind of pivot their business model in a safe space with grant funds to do non-credit bearing credential-based training. So instead of earning credits, you're going to earn the industry-based recognized credential. And instead of going for 18 months, because that's not feasible for you, particularly if you're an adult with a mortgage and daycare payments and bills, now you have a model that's an accelerated on-ramp of 20 weeks or less that gets you into this quality job so that you can continue your career pathway. Most of our employers are willing to pick up where some basic education and training leaves off. So, and particularly in the industry specific jobs, they're not always asking for the finite technical diploma. They want the basic skill sets and understanding of energy, motion, whatever it is the trade is, and then they will do that last mile training. So that's really where we're pushing it right now.
That sounds great, and I like the skills part of it. Well, as a follow-up question to that, Amity, are there any companies that sponsor job training programs that upskill our workers and prepare potential employers to perform needed jobs?
Yeah, almost all of our employers in the vocational space and the industry space are doing their own type of training in some way. They're not necessarily sending you to a Vortec or a TCAT, but I know that Skip could talk about his automotive partnership, which I think is a flagship gold standard program. But they're bringing you in to do 4 to 6 weeks of training to get you job ready and put you on the floor. And they have to do that because the reality is that the demand is far greater than the volume that we have been able to produce. It's interesting that you mentioned that, Bridget. I just looked at our TCAT enrollment in Memphis. So our TCAT enrollment in Memphis is about 900 students, and it's going to take most of them over a year to graduate for something. And the majority of them are in mechanic and repair technologies and technicians. And then we have 200 in precision manufacturing types of programs. And so we have a current demand of about 5,000 for machine setters. And so you can see workforce development very quickly becomes a math equation. And where the math doesn't work for an employer, they've got to solve for that gap themselves. And that is why almost every single one of them are doing their own type of first mile and last mile training to develop their own workforce.
That is great. Great to hear that the employers have skin in the game also. So let's insert a construction fun fact in here. The average construction worker is about 42 and sometimes 55 years old, depending on the industry. So there's a great need for upskilling and skills and trying to figure out best practices in each particular industry. So the next question, some schools are starting to reintroduce VOTEC programs to their curriculum. In your opinion, should we influence our school systems and their leadership to make a requirement that students take VOTEC classes? And so Skip, we'll start with you.
Hey, most definitely. We need to start at the legislative level and allow school districts the freedom to allow students to choose in their elective courses. I understand everyone needs to take math, English, science, and social studies, but from that point on, if an individual wants to learn how to weld, that individual should be able to access that curriculum starting in the 9th grade. Now, more tech's not going to take on a 9th grader because number one, I can't afford the insurance that would, have to cover, any kind of accident. But they should start the process, and so that comes from the legislative level, allowing school districts the freedom to arrange their schedule to allow the access to vocational training. I would say that there also, I know we've tried to do this, I think, at the school district level, but we need to train our counselors to allow students to be able to say, hey, this is an interesting field. You need to look into this. Not every student is college bound. And I had an interview with a former superintendent at one time that said, we want to see all our students go to college. And my first response was, I don't see that happening. But we really need to start counseling our students into some careers that look nice, look great, give them some challenge. We've got some great opportunities, like in our machining program, students that graduate and go to work in a high-tech industry running a $500,000 Swiss turn machine. They're making good money. They're in an air conditioning facility. They're clean. It's not a dirty job. It's just a great opportunity. One other thing I would share with you is that, plumbers make a ton of money. I tell this story. The doctor gets a plumber to work on his house. The plumber hands the doctor a bill, and the doctor says, well, I don't charge this much as a doctor. And the plumber goes, I didn't charge that much when I was a doctor either. So what I'm saying is that, there should be a whole new mindset coming out of the high school educational process.
Right, I agree with that 100%.
Can I add to that just a little bit, Bridget?
Sure.
Because I think it's so important. And honestly, Austin, we probably need a whole other hour to unpack this topic. But I would argue in many cases, we don't have so much as a skills gap as an opportunity gap. So to have equitable access to career and technical education regardless of the zip code where you are attending school, is a real challenge across the country, really, but certainly in Memphis Shelby County schools and certainly in the state of Tennessee. All school districts get entitlement money to do CTE programs, career and technical education programs. We are in an urban district where that has to be spread out over 47 high schools. Or that is the theory of action, that it is spread out over 47 high schools. And as a result, as you can imagine, when you're trying to make a cake for a skills-based workforce, but every school has a different ingredient and not all the ingredients have been fully funded or fully staffed, or students aren't being scheduled into them. Now you're not talking about a skills gap, you're talking about an opportunity gap where either the resources, the coaching, the awareness, or even a skilled instructor hasn't been available so that a student can fully embrace and experience a pathway for a vocational experience. We are advocating strongly with the school district that they rethink the way they do that, that they think about going back to vocational centers where you're putting your resources in a concentrated space so that you're buying the best equipment, you can get the best instructors, and you can have the best experience, and you can bring students to that center for a portion of the day or even days at a time, as opposed to trying to piecemeal career and technical education in a way that is not getting the job done, not just for our workforce needs, but also for the exploration and the quality experience of the student. So, long answer to, we have a lot of work to do in the 6 through 12 space about how we make our students aware and give them experiences for these quality job pathways.
Yes, I like that opportunity gap. I like that. So to that end, what collaborations are happening between your organizations about how to provide easier access to vocational programs and increase the labor pool? Skip?
I'm sorry, I was hoping that Amity was going to answer that. Repeat that question again.
What collaborations are happening between your organizations about how to provide easier access to vocational programs to increase our labor pool?
Well, we both mentioned the Good Jobs Grant, and the Good Jobs Grants are going to be allowing students or let's say prospective employees access to these programs, and it would also allow them to have transportation, childcare. Correct me if I'm wrong, is there also some like food allowances? In other words, we're going to break down all the financial barriers that potential employees will have. And they're going to enter into this Good Jobs program. The curriculum is being developed by the employers. Basically, it's what the employers need. And we're going to put together the curriculum, and then they're going to come and go to this one-stop shop where they go through a program of 14 to 18 weeks, whatever the length is determined by the employers. And then we're going to get them into the workforce. Now, sounds like they're going to run more tech out of business because they're all going to do this real quick and get a job. What we're hoping is also to create a pathway from that particular level to a 2-year degree. And then I'm working on articulation agreements with Fort Smith, Arkansas, and Rankin College, where you can get an online degree for a 4-year Bachelor of Applied Technology that would allow those individuals a pathway, not only from not being employed all the way to having a bachelor's degree and being a supervisor at a company. We're also in negotiation with Mississippi State University, so we're real close to being able to announce that same problem. So we're trying to break down all the barriers financially to allow that flow from being unemployed all the way to having a bachelor's degree and working in a job and being very productive.
Wow, that's great. Amity, do you want to chime in?
Well, Skip, you did a great job with that. You undersold yourself. You know, you could read any labor force report for the Delta region, and they all come to the same conclusion. Some are shorter than others, but they all say the same thing. The Delta region has had far too much of an emphasis on college degree pathways only. And as a result, we have kept out underserved populations from accessing quality jobs that do not require college diplomas. It also says that we have overinflated our workforce by providing college diplomas, credentials or graduates, and putting them into positions that do not require a college degree. And so here we are in this major moment of an advanced manufacturer coming into this space, Ford, and we have got a lot of solving to do for workforce. So going back to the non-credit bearing, accelerated credential, fast track programs that are available to adults in 16 weeks, ideally 16, but possibly 20 or less, to give them that first credential to get into the workplace is absolutely critical to solving not just for economic mobility, but also for our economic competitiveness. We cannot continue to grow Memphis and attract quality businesses with quality jobs if we cannot point to a way to produce a workforce. And as it stands right now, it doesn't matter if you are HICO and you need an engineer, or if you are a med tech device company and you just need a machinist. None of them are willing to wait 2 and 4 years for that talent. They're saying to the engineering programs, let us have them 1 semester on, 1 semester off. They're saying to the machinist programs, you've got to get them to us faster, or just do this. We'll take it the rest of the way. And so now that there is an alignment that we need to be faster, right? But also not totally compromise skill. Now is the time where we're talking about an accelerated skills center. Now is a perfect time for the Good Jobs Grant to give us a down payment on those accelerated pathways and adult education models for adults whose life did not move in a straight line. They cannot go to school 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, which, by the way, is what a TCAT is, 6 days, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. This is the alternative that is long overdue in our region. It's also the alternative that many states across the country figured out a decade ago. We're just very behind.
Right. So would you say that traditional colleges and universities adopt and promote practical vocational programs?
So that's what you're seeing happen across the country. You're seeing your junior colleges really start to pivot, or your university colleges start to credential inside of their degrees. IUPUI, Anderson, Indiana, is a perfect example. That is a 2-year technical school that also articulates into a 4-year program. Now they are stacking those industry credentials inside of the degree so that as the student comes in and out of their educational pathway, they have the currency of the credential to go into the workplace right away. You're going to see more of those next gen type of pathways. That is this hybrid model that allows the school to stay intact with their accreditation, but also allows the workplace to partner more closely with the school to get what they need more readily.
Wow.
And let me say this, the 4-year colleges that are regionally accredited, and when I say regionally accredited, in Tennessee, it's SACS accreditation, in the past have really put hands off for more tech because we are COE and probably TCAT as well. Now you're seeing the colleges come to us and say, hey, we'll accept your credits now, and it'll be working toward a 4-year degree. So, Mississippi State's going to accept 72 hours of credit toward their Bachelor of Applied Technology degree. And it was in the past because of the accreditation differences. And so now they're breaking those down, as Amity said, and interested in letting those people through this process.
Great.
Yeah, we're one of the only states in the country that doesn't have a clear and guaranteed articulation pathway from the technical school to a university. So imagine trying to sit in front of a parent who believes that their child should get a 4-year degree and explain to them that for dual enrollment, or right after graduation, they should do a TCAT or a more tech first. When you tell them that there's no guarantee that that learning will transfer to a four-year university towards that four-year degree, that's something that we have to own and solve for as a state if we expect to be competitive as a state in our business climate.
Right. That is great information. So let's insert a fun fact here, construction fun fact. The Empire State Building has 10 million brick, 10 million. And it only took 20 months to lay. So I did the math. And so at 10 million brick, 20 months, that's 500,000 brick a month. If you divide the 500,000 by 4, which is 4 weeks in a month, we have 125,000 brick laid a week. That's 50 bricklayers laying about 500 bricks a day. So do we need people or do we need people? So we are on the right path to make sure that we have the people we need to get our construction jobs done.
I'd like to ask one other question. I wonder how much it costs to build the Empire State Building and how would it be duplicated now?
Ooh, that's a profound question, because with the manpower that we have now in our aging population, that's a loaded question. So this is kind of bringing us almost to the end of our program before we get to questions. So Amity, you get the last question. So how does focusing on workforce development help us get prepared for the big Blue Oval City project?
Yeah, well, first, I'm sorry that it took Ford Blue Oval City to get us focused on workforce, because these problems were coming down before the pandemic and long before we had a major automotive manufacturer coming in. But whatever it takes, right, to get us refocused, here we are. I would also say that in the Memphis region, for far too long, we've been talking about workforce development as a social service program, when in reality, your workforce development strategy is a key lever in your ability to be economically competitive as a region and to attract new business and grow existing business in your region. So now that we have had this opportunity to reset and everybody is finally talking about workforce development in the context that we should be talking about it, and employers are struggling to fill those skills-based and trade-based roles, now we can talk about input and output of volume. We can talk about the gaps and the inequities that are happening in the high school space. We can talk about the lack of awareness that teachers have about the jobs of the region. We can talk about the fact that we've been graduating students from universities and we've been exporting our talent instead of keeping our kids here in Memphis where they belong, because we want them to stay as valuable citizens and a viable part of our city. Now that everybody is panicked because we have Ford coming in with 11,000 jobs, which by the way, equates to 23,000 new jobs. So their 11 will create a total of 23 over the next 5 years. Now that everybody's paying attention, we can collectively and productively start chipping away at the things that have been holding us back in this workforce development space. And that's exactly what we are doing as a result of that announcement. It's unfortunate, we needed to start having these conversations long before, but if that announcement is what it took, then okay. The reality is Ford is building the smartest factory ever built in North America, period, end of story. The technology and the tier one suppliers that they are bringing with them will drive and impact all of our workspaces, whether we realize it or not, through artificial intelligence, through robotics, through the Internet of Things, through cloud-based computing. That will accelerate this region unlike it has ever been accelerated before. My biggest fear, and the thing that really keeps me up at night, truly, is that the urban core gets left behind because we didn't do what was necessary to provide the on-ramps and the pathways for people to get the training and the upskill opportunity that they need to step into these jobs. And once you get left behind in a period that is going to accelerate our technology, our digital skills, and our workplace landscapes more than ever before over the next 3 years, you're left behind permanently. And so we have this moment in time as a city to get it right for everybody. And, Skip Redmond and I are in a trench every day. We sometimes bicker like husband and wife, but that's just how committed we are. And we have other colleagues in this work with us: Kyla Gayet, Sandra Howell, Dick Irwin from the University of Memphis. You've a dedicated chairman circle membership at the chamber, just really intent on seizing this moment in time and not missing it.
Thank you. Well, I just want to thank you all for your unwavering attention to this much needed industry. You all are doing such a wonderful job, and I can't wait to see the results. Thank you both. So at this point, I'll toss it back to Austin for closing questions and remarks.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you so much. My apologies. I'm currently showing up purple on my camera, so I'm gonna have to be off camera for this portion. But thank you all to everyone who submitted some questions in the chat. And I'm gonna start off with a question to Skip. And this is kind of two questions put into one. Cherry Whitehead Thompson asked, how does MoreTech recruit students to your programs? And also Shirley Collins put in the chat, if you've thought about going into the schools with students and graduates of your school, so you can highlight some success stories that have happened in MoreTech. So a two-parter: how do y'all recruit students? And then have you considered bringing students that are at MoreTech to these high schools?
Well, first of all, we do some television. We do television advertising. We do radio advertising. And then we have two counselors, admissions counselors that go to all the schools in Memphis, not only the Memphis City high schools, but the municipals, as well as the charter schools. And so we're reaching out and talking to students, particularly juniors and seniors that are interested. We've hosted a counselor's breakfast for high school counselors to give them an opportunity to see what MoreTech's like. We've hosted some Ford days at the Auto Tech School, and that's been it's a new movement because Ford's really invested in Memphis, and they're very interested in our auto tech program. So they've had some days where they brought high school students in and toured our facility. We have not taken the opportunity to bring students to schools with our admissions counselors. It's a good idea. They're so busy though. Our program is structured so that you have a 3-hour class in the morning, and that's, let's say you're taking welding in the morning and you got 3 hours of welding. And if you want to get an associate degree, you take the gen ed class from 11:30 to 12:30, and then you jump right into a machining class in the afternoon to get your associate degree. So they're in school all day long, and we require a 90% attendance. That goes to that leads me to a question I saw in the chat about soft skills. We train our students in each one of our programs on a daily basis about soft skills. If you're a student, you're in that classroom and the teacher is your supervisor. And you have to be able to relate to that teacher as if he's your boss on the job. And you have to be in school 90%. And obviously, employers lose a lot of employees because they just simply do not show up. So we're constantly focusing on soft skills throughout the class and training them how to be employable within their particular program. So I tried to answer 3 questions out of 2. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Skip. I really appreciate those answers, and I'm sure the people that asked them appreciate you as well. I'm not sure if Amity's still there. She turned her camera off, but there is one question that was directed to her. Hello there, Amity. And Sherry Brooks said, as a former leader with MSCS, when were some of these vocational programs introduced? And she says that many junior high school students and middle school students really need introductions to these options. So can you discuss some how MSCS can incorporate some of these VOTech options in these middle schools?
Yeah, I agree agree with that. The sooner the better. You know, kids start thinking about their careers around third grade when they realize they can't be Batman when they grow up. And so by the time they get into high school, they've already succumbed to a lot of gender perceptions about what they can and can't be. They already have some ideas based on what they have and have not seen, what they should be. And so by ninth grade, a lot of those ideations are already set in stone. It needs to happen at a much earlier age. So that goes back to my earlier comment about the inequities of CTE exposure in any large urban district. It depends on how the money is spread around. It depends on the appetite of the principal to do something new. There's not a lot of guidance from the state and how the schools stand up CTE programs, other than that there should be in an in-demand field. All of those things, and that's not disparaging Memphis Shelby County schools in any way. It is just a side effect of a large urban district, is that a lot of your career and technical education, unless you are specifying like really specific centers like vocational centers or really hardcore academy programs, are extremely watered down, and students do not get the choices that they should get. A lot of it depending upon zip code. Schools that have a bigger population, 2,000 or more, they generate more CTE money, and so they can build more programs. Schools that are under enrolled, 400 or more, they don't have the ability to do as robust CTE programs because they're not generating enough money, and it's harder to find an instructor and enroll enough kids to support the course. So you can see how all of this creates a lot of inequities very, very quickly. I will say that the state of Tennessee has a designation called a Ready Graduate. It is part of the school accountability formula. So part of a school's rating is based on how many students are ready graduate. And that means that they have taken multiple post-secondary career opportunities, whether that's dual enrollment or CTE. They got a such and such score on the ACT. There's 5 different pathways or so to that ready graduate. Memphis Shelby County Schools has one of the lowest ready graduate designations in the state. And it's not from academic performance so much as it is a lack of opportunity to take consecutive coursework. That is something that I know that they are working on. That is something that Angela Whitelaw has made her absolute professional charge, is to unwrap it. I just had a conversation with Superintendent Williams as early as just a couple of weeks ago, talking about how we solve for this in a way that's not only meaningful to the student, but is also going to be meaningful and impactful to the demands of the regional workforce. And that's where we have also been utilizing data to help them make some good concentrated decisions on maybe some programs they need to stop doing, and then other programs they need to start doing because they're more relevant to the needs of the regional workforce. Those are very complex issues that won't solve themselves overnight. But again, we're working on them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that answer, Amity. So we have another question in the chat from Clarica, and she's asking if there are any CTE programs available for students with learning disabilities. And this is more direct to Skip. The second part, does MoreTech honor students' IEPs to ensure that they have access to MoreTech's curriculum?
Yes, we'll honor their IEPs, but obviously with our hands-on ability, you know, we probably will have a challenge for folks that have some physical disabilities. Now, learning disabilities, you know, we'll allow students to have untimed tests. We'll give them additional study guides toward tests, and those are more academic than hands-on. So, you know, we'll do whatever their IEP will suggest to a certain extent. We're private nonprofit, and you know, we are limited in a sense, but the 2 main things obviously is untimed tests and additional study guides prior to test, at least 2 days before a test. Let's say a teacher an instructor schedules a test in HVAC, and this individual has a learning disability. So he gets a study guide that's 2 days before the test. So he has 2 days to work on that study guide before the test taken, and he has an untimed test. So he can take it more than the regular test taker is allotted. What was the second part of that question? Sorry.
Oh, so that was actually the second part, and I'm glad that you answered it. But the first part was, do y'all know if there's any specific programs that are available to people who have learning disabilities?
Not real sure. I don't know if there's any specific programs. I would say that we had an individual that graduated this past July who was deaf, and he brought an interpreter into the plumbing program and plumbing class, and he took our plumbing program and had the interpreter. So, we made the ability to have that accommodation taken care of, and it was a success. And I believe he's employed as a plumber right now.
It's awesome. All right, so we have time for one more question, and Amity answered it in the chat, but I'd like to hear her expound upon it a little bit more. Marcus, let me see here. Marcus Faulkner asked, what is the current condition of knowledge among students about various vocations available after passing their standard 12 years of education?
Yeah, I told Marcus on a scale of 1 to 10 and -3, because the reality is, look, kids, they become what they see. And so just the first, in the high school space and middle school space especially, teachers' plates are full, right? They have all sorts of state requirements. They have a scope and sequence of course standards that they have to get through. There are high stakes tests that end the semester in the school year where students really need to show growth and achievement. And that is their primary focus. A teacher does not get any type of regional career development training. And we're trying to solve for that, as is junior achievement, as is SKIP. We're really trying to get in front of the teacher in creative ways, virtual ways, physical ways, take them on tours and expose them to what these career pathways are, because they ultimately are the ones that have the credibility with the students. They have the credibility with the parents. They're the ones that are coaching students into these pathways, but they can't coach them if they don't know about it. And so you talk about manufacturing in particular, and just skilled trades. That's been a pivot that's happened in our region over the last couple that really are very unfamiliar with what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it smells like. To Skip's point, these are some of the cleanest environment, most sterile environments that you could ever work in. But when we talk about advanced manufacturing, people have these images of a Laverne and Shirley episode or a movie that they saw somewhere along the line, and that's not what it is anymore. It's all robots and computers and digital stuff and tech, stuff that is way beyond me, as a matter of fact. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've been looking, this is a tremendous mistake, but we had hoped and had made an ask of the State Department of Labor a year ago to see if they were going to do anything statewide, because the entire state has changed to manufacturing as well over the last couple of years. And we've just not seen any leadership in that space to do more of a statewide blanketed campaign of awareness. And so we're very aware that as a region, we're going to have to figure that out ourselves. And we are working as a coalition of stakeholders that are ready to do it, with private sector, of course, leading from the front. But it's a big gap. And I also saw a question about soft skills. Look, teachers are not parents. Workplaces are not parents. You can't teach a person to be respectful. That's something that's got to come from somewhere, whether that's home, church, auntie, grandma, whatever. What I will say is that kids learn about work at work. We are graduating entire senior classes and college classes that have never worked a day in their life. They've never held a job. And that is not okay, because that's where you learn how to show up on time. That's where you learn how to be respectful. That's where you learn how that when you work, you get paid. And whether it's a socioeconomic challenge, middle class, higher class, we have a parenting style that doesn't think that kids should have to work, go to school, and do athletics. And that's really starting to bite us in a big way in the workplace space. So if you were an employer, I really encourage you to look inward. Look at the number of 16 and 17-year-olds that are in your workplace, either for work-based learning or mentorship, internship. If that number is 0, then that is part of the problem. And I can show you how to be part of the solution if you're interested in becoming a work-based learning site. But kids have got to get to work to learn about work. It doesn't happen in the classroom per se.
As far as also one other point about soft skills is they need to understand the chain of command. I've got students that'll come up to me and say, well, the instructor did this. And I said, well, did you talk to the instructor? No, I'm going to you. And I said, well, go back to the instructor. You don't need to talk to me until you get it worked out. If you can't work it out, then we'll both sit down and talk about it. But, I've even had students go over me and try to contact the board member. They just laugh at them, say, go back to the beginning. And that's an important thing about working, is that you can get fired if you jump over a supervisor and go to someone higher than your immediate boss. And we try to instill that. We let them know, hey, you can get fired for this. And anything else that goes on in the classroom that is not a soft skill quality. So we stay focused on that during the course of the day.
Well, I really appreciate all of y'all's answers. A big thank you to Bridget, Skip, and Amity. Once again, we will be posting this conversation on our website and our YouTube, so look out for that. Other than that, I hope everyone has an amazing day. Thank you so much for attending, and see y'all next time at the next conversation.
Moretech.org. And not like, go Tigers.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
You too.
Thank you. Skip, you saw
Happy
my
Thanksgiving.